Alright then, I'm an anime nerd, and this is Chivalry of a Failed Knight. But let's pause here. If you're new here, my name is Barry, and this is my Why Chivalry of a Failed Knight Isn't Getting a Season 2. I will talk all about what goes on behind your favorite animes. Now if you like this kind of content, do make sure to leave me a like, because that sends the message to YouTube to push the video, and is the best way to help. I really want to get to 500 likes on this particular video. Also, let me know down in the comment sections, do you want a season 2? Comment yes or no. Lastly, a staggering amount of people like the video but don't subscribe. I can't even begin to think about how much this would help my channel, so please consider it. If you do, comment I subscribe, and I will make sure to comment back to you. And make sure to watch till the end of the video, so you don't miss anything. Now, the first minute of this anime always confuses me. So after Ikki's done his morning jogging routine, he goes back to his room, where Stella, our main girl protagonist, is changing. And of course, the cliche begins, with her being very shocked and embarrassed that this new guy has seen her in her apartment. So in response, he tells her, wait, and gets naked to call it even. 1. How does she not notice that she's in someone else's room? For anyone who's been into a dormitory or an apartment, or just a new house in general, you'll know if someone has been living there. Even if it's not a messy apartment or a messy place, you'll know. 2, instead of him being like, you're in my room, he strips. I don't need to really explain that one, right? 3, everything the director says. The director simply just leaves and doesn't really say anything about the situation. Her response in the end is like, well, hey, if you don't like it, you can leave, which of course Stella has a problem with, and Ikki's just like, yeah, I'm fine with this. Which leads to the duel with the winner wearing the pants in the house, and deciding how things will go. Looking at this now, I can only think, like, what if this guy was like a scumbag or a hentai protagonist? How would this end? This director just fucking sucks, which in the end, she's apparently the best director in the history of the school, essentially, which just means how bad of directors they have. It's insane. Stella, being the hothead character that she's known to be, seems to just up the stakes, with the loser becoming the winner's servant for life. Cut to some feet pics, and the battle starts and Ikki wins. Shock. And now that I get to see it again, I have another problem with it. Their rank is basically based on the mana they possess, you know, rather than their actual combating ability. But whenever there's an actual competition, it's like a one-on-one duel or has to do with combating ability. And the director says there's no way we can actually track his skills. Yes, there is. I hate it when animes do this bullshit, because I can name a number of animes that actually follow this very closely of, oh, we can't properly track our main guy's skills, so we have to put him in the lowest category. Example 1 is how they did it in Duel Masters, GX series, if you know Yu-Gi-Oh! They would make the freshmen battle instructors to get an idea of where to place them. And even though the main protagonist is seen as weak because of his red colored jacket, by the end of the first term, everyone knows who's the best duelist despite, you know, the color of his jacket. They can just say, yeah, it's Jaden. Jaden's the best duelist. There's Zane, and then there's Jaden, and then that's it. Everyone else is just fodder at this point. But instead of fixing, you know, the problem of actually giving him classes and helping him along in the scene, they do nothing. So fast forward, Stella finds herself thirsting for Ikki. No. This line told me all I needed to know.
No, Stella, you are a princess and this is totally disgraceful. But he is so... Hang on.
Like, she's really down bad. It's been 6 years since the release of this anime and the show, and I still remember this scene. Stella is busting a big nut and is just grinding on him at this point. So what have we learned so far? So, one wants to be given the chance to fail and be a normal kid. The other wants to be given a chance to literally exist. Episode 2. Then we get to the big tragic backstory of his family, who really just don't like him. For what reason, you might be asking? Oh, no, none really. Him just being alive. Then we meet Nagi, who is the gem of the show. Truly a gem. If I want a season 2, I want to know how his story plays out. He was cool. With the episode ending with this literal thirst demon. She wants it bad. I don't know what it is, but by the end, I'm just finding out that Ikki's power is literally him becoming a masochist and just taking all the pain that he's been given and learning to just overcome his obstacles. But he has to first get hit a lot. in all honesty, I can't tell you how many times I was pleasantly surprised with how good these episodes are. I mean, sure, they're not gonna be like the Violet Evergarden or the Fruit Basket or whatever mainstream action romance title you're subscribed to currently right now, but I wasn't supposed to like this anime as much as I did. Like how the main two leads have this awkward interactions with each other every episode and getting interrupted when they are making progress. It becomes really endearing, with this being their first real relationship with the opposite sex, so they're trying to figure out how dating works. And I gotta say, it's kind of on point for a couple of these episodes. Or how when they added Ayase, I know another girl added to the harem, but instead of giving her this boring arc, that most girls in her position would be given, she's given the most epic part of the show. Like, her arc was literally the best part of the anime. We get to Kurado and his asshole gang of friends breaking a glass over the main lead's head the first time we see him, and how he beat her father in a duel, putting him in the hospital on his actual deathbed.
Hey, Dad!
Took his dojo, and then left her daughter basically homeless for a while. The show literally made her homeless and didn't even talk about it. Is no one else asking the question of how did she survive for so long? Anyways, the duel begins with Iki and this asshole Kurado was the best part of the show. But before we even got to that part of the show, we're learning about Ayase's ability, which is fucking busted. She can plant literal blades and slashes before the fight even freaking begins, even though it's against the rules. But she reminds me of that character from Black Clover with the red hair. I don't know his name, but you know who I'm talking about, who can just set up traps before the fight even begins. Then, mind you, her sword technique got improved before the fight even begins. So literally, she should win this in every regard. Let's just be honest, she should win. She should have won, but she didn't. Whatever, cool. Main protagonist, cool, whatever. But like I said, that's the pregame. The main course is versus Kurado, who literally, he should not lose at all either. His ability is busted. If you haven't seen the anime, go watch it. You'll understand he's busted as well. And that was the best fight of the anime. Because if we skip to the final episodes where he wins the tournament for his school or whatever, there is actually nothing hype that happens. The battle with the student council lasted 1 minute, and the battle with Stella was predictable. The finale just felt very off-putting compared to the middle was epic. There was no chance he should have won, but he wins it because he's a main protagonist, but the characters were freaking crazy, If anything, the last couple of episodes made you want to cry a little bit, but it wasn't hype. It just made you sad. Now let's talk about something that no anime fan likes to talk about, that being the Blu Ray sales. Generally, the Blu Ray sales make or break your average seasonal animes and decide whether it gets a season 2 or gets cut off. As far as the revenue, this anime made a total of 121,500,000 yen. And let's put that in USD dollars, and we get 1,108,450 cents. That's not enough by itself. But to be fair to this anime, that is more than a lot of other animes can generally say. I would even say that's enough to consider making another season. This is still a rare thing to say because animes tend to sell less the second season, and they also sell less during re-releases. Chivalry of a Failed Knight made 2,963 copies, and then did a re-release and sold 678. So in total, it sold 3,641. Which, in comparison to direct competition, that being the Asterisk War, a show that I love, by the way, it did similar numbers, and I would say better numbers, considering that Asterisk War had a season 1 and season 2 in the franchise. Keeping this in mind, though, the people at Anime News Network basically called Chivalry of a Failed Knight a copy of Asterisk War. I don't know which one came out before. It doesn't really matter to me. All I'm going to say is that if the copy, beats the original, quote unquote, then that makes it now the original in my head, or just makes it better. So let's talk about some merchandising issues. So for this anime, they could not use the manga sales to help the anime's sales. Chivalry of a Failed Knight's manga is published by Square Enix, and in the United States, typically it depends on the agreement made by the publisher and the author that decide who owns the actual work. For an example, my sister wanted to sell her book, so she decided to become the publisher, so she would own her own work. In Japan though, from what I see, it's usually the publisher who owns the work and not the author. Here, usually the author of the creative work is the owner of the copyright. But in the publishing industry, the owner of the copyright may be the publishing company due to the agreement between the author and the publisher. Sometimes, even though a book is published by a major publisher, the author still owns the copyright. So, in a sense, this is the case. The anime is based on a light novel. The light novel's publisher is CB Creative. And if we look at the production company, aka the people that pay to make the anime, aka the owners, CB Creative is on the board, but they're at the bottom of the listing, meaning that they own the least amount of the anime. And this is where I'd say they should have used the income from the light novel to make a second season, but in this case, they already did that because that's their income. But I'm assuming that the rest of the people on the board didn't feel the need to make a season 2, so that means no season 2 is happening. To be honest, I agree, CB isn't too known for dipping their toes into anime production, and this was their first really try at it with anime that they published, And in a way, Fail Night didn't really fail. I mean, sure, 3,000 copies isn't, the most impressive numbers, but they just wanted to do a test run and they did pretty well and sold a pretty good amount. But after this anime, they kind of stopped producing animes. It's only until 2019 did they really try again and again and again and again and again and one more time. Damachi has been their golden child for the past half a decade, and that's when it hit me. The other half of this catalog. Still, there aren't any winners here except for Danmachi, Goblin Slayer, Witch's Journey, and Failed Knight. And if I'm going off of Danmachi's success to indicate whether Failed Knight should get a season 2, the answer is no. If I'm saying, well, couldn't they do as well as they get a second season? Would they be able to equal up to Danmachi? No, because Danmachi sold 10,000, and I don't see Failed Knight season 2 selling 7,000 copies. It's not going to happen. They're probably going to be roughly around 3,000 to the 1,000 range, which wouldn't really advocate make a second season. Other goods sold. So we're going to talk about the other revenue sources besides just the Blu Rays, because there are other revenue sources. Of course, we all know about streaming, which they're currently on Hulu and Amazon Prime. So as far as streaming, they've been monetizing for at least 6 years. But as far as other goods, what else did they sell? Well, they sold CDs, of course, gamer mouse pads, body pillows, wallpapers, anime figures, buttons, t-shirts, outro cover images, more high definition covers, live events where you would, buy food and get prizes for, keychains, bags, etc. And to top it all off, all this was housed under one site, being the main site. This was huge at the time, and still to this day is pretty huge. The point I'm getting at is, at the time, anime merchandising wasn't the best. The best I've seen over the course of making and covering a lot of these animes is like you having about 3 or 4 of those things on one site. So I know that them housing all this on one site is not the norm in the market. It should be now, but at the time it definitely wasn't, so this was definitely groundbreaking what they did. The only mistakes I have is not having light novels sold here. That doesn't make sense to me because, the light novel company is a part of the board that, produces this anime, so you would think that they would want to say, hey, you could also buy the light novel here that we make in-house. But I assume there's a reason for that, so I'm not really going to complain about it here. My final thoughts on the anime. So what now? What's the chance of a season 2? I would say the show has a 20% chance of coming back. The first season covered the first 3 volumes of the light novel, and in 2020, it finished with 18 volumes of material to use. Now that it's fully finished, you're saying, well, it could get another season. I'd still lean on the side of no. It's been more than half a decade since the last project, and usually I see sales go down after releases of an anime or, a revamping or second season of an anime. I will say that Irregular High School waited 6 years before making a comeback and made a season 2 and a spinoff, but the people that own it don't really seem to be willing to make another one. But I will say, if they do want to make another season, they have to do it soon. I only say that because the story just finished and they don't really have much time before people completely forget about them and go on to the next big anime or average seasonal animes and stuff like that and just literally forget about them. Overall, the anime was a 2.3 out of 5. 2 main characters have amazing chemistry. The problem with the anime has to do with 1, having a great antagonist at the ending. They don't have that. 2, having poor world building. The first with the antagonist is simple. Prado was like the only good antagonist the show had, but he was taken out in episode 8 and then teased that he would be in later projects. And sure, you could count Iki's father and that fat guy that tried to put him in jail, and yeah, the scene with Iki's father in episode 11 was enough to make any grown man cry, but he couldn't punch them, so yeah, it's not really doing it for me as a fan. 2, most school animes have this problem of world building, so once they go out to a new setting, with that being the next season, the same school elements that worked in the first season would not work in the second season. And a lot of other harem animes and all other school animes in general have this problem, so it's not just this anime. This is a general problem with a lot of school animes. They can't translate and do other genres outside of school. Now, make sure if you like this video to leave me a like, as well as subscribe if you haven't already, and also if you wish to buy this anime, I have my link in the description below so you can purchase the anime. It helps me out. But yeah, I'm done. Peace.